Welcome to Elizabeth's Chronicles. If you love true crime, consider subscribing. Lawrence Larry Delisle was a hard-working service manager at a local tire store, where he worked more than 50 hours a week to make ends meet. He earned a salary of $33,000 yearly. He owed over $18,000 in charge account debts, medical bills and loans. Times were tough, financially, for the family. So tough, that they had to move in with his brother, where they could live rent-free until things were better. He had to sell his brand new Aerostar wagon, and use his late father's car, in which his father had committed suicide. Regardless of their financial strains and even after working long, exhausting days, Larry would come home with a smile on his face for his children. He would spend every extra penny he had on doing things to make his family happy. He and his wife, Suzanne, would take their children on frequent day trips to the zoo in Toledo or Detroit, or sometimes just simple things like going out for ice cream. On the afternoon of August 3, 1989, 28-year-old Larry Delisle and his wife, Suzanne, were out driving around with their 4 children, 8-year-old Brian, 4-year-old Melissa, 2-year-old Katie, and 8-month-old Emily. The family just came from pricing beds for 2 of their children, and then they treated the kids to ice cream. The night before, the family had driven over to view boats passing by. Their daughter, Melissa, asked if they could go watch them again. The parents both agreed. So they drove over to the Detroit River, and watched for boats to go by. However, the family found themselves at the same dead-end street as the night before, but this time no boats passed by. They were at the barrier's edge. Emily, their 8-month-old baby girl, was teething, so Suzanne asked her husband to go to the nearby corner shop, to buy something to soothe her gums. Larry is about to turn. He was exhausted and dehydrated. His legs were cramping up throughout the day. He accidentally pushes down on the gas pedal, but when he removes his foot from the gas, the pedal is stuck down, and keeps going at full speed toward the barrier. Suzanne attempts to help by trying to steer the car, but panic sets in and there was no time to maneuver the car in a different direction. A little after 9 p.m., in their 1980s model, Ford Limited, the family's car sped off of the barrier's edge, at Eureka Road, east on Van Alstyne, in Wyandotte. It becomes airborne for seconds, then lands in the Detroit River. The car sunk under 30 feet of water. Larry and Suzanne both managed to escape the sinking car, through the windshield that burst on impact. Witnesses stated that they noticed Larry surface first. He was treading water. Once Suzanne surfaced, she was screaming frantically, "My babies! Get my babies!" Wyandotte Rescue made it to the scene within minutes, but it was too late for the 4 children. All 4 drowned while still strapped into their seats. When the children were all extracted from the car, the news media filmed it as it was happening. This drew the public's attention and caused an outcry that someone needed to be punished. After this terrible accident, the news media pressed the parents for an interview. The couple finally agreed, but reluctantly. The media, and the small town attacked the family relentlessly, saying neither showed emotion and were not crying in front of the cameras, so that meant they did this on purpose. An angry, anonymous person called the Delisle home threatening to blow them up. When the car was extracted and examined, it had noticeable defects. The motor mount was damaged, causing it to lean to one side, which was pulling on the accelerator, which was known to cause acceleration sticking. On top of that, during police testing, the acceleration stuck once, and they had to throw it in neutral, and turn the key off to get it to stop accelerating. However, because it worked fine on the next try, they ignored the one time it stuck. This model of car had known problems similar to what happened with Delisle's car. Detectives investigating the case did not like the answer Larry gave, that the gas pedal stuck. About a week after the accident, detectives pick up both parents, for a polygraph test at around 7 a.m. in the morning. The parents are driven separately to the station for the test. The two are kept for 18 hours, until 1 a.m. in the morning. During the interviews, Larry eventually gave what they called a confession, that he may have did this on purpose, but the confession was weak, and coerced. In the interrogation, Delisle was parroting what the interrogator was saying. He didn't actually say he did it though. Regardless, the police claimed they had an official confession. This fed into the media, and public frenzy. They continued to push the narrative that the couple were guilty. They even took excerpts from the confession, which were only bits and pieces taken out of context. The story attracted national attention. It was featured in Time magazine, and the New York Times. People accused the parents of killing their own children, and wondered how the average Joe could do this to their own children. Wayne County prosecutor, Kevin Simofsky, said that Delisle was drowning in debt, and felt burdened by his life with his wife and 4 kids. He argued that Delisle was a very troubled man, who deliberately drove his children to their deaths. Judge Robert Colombo Jr. ruled to suppress the confession, due to it being coerced. Defense attorney Frank Eman requested a change of venue, since the public in that area all had seen the confession in the media, and even parts were in newspapers, but the judge denied the request. At the trial, Larry's defense blamed the deaths on mechanical failure. A frozen accelerator pedal, mixed with leg cramps. And that his confession was only due to being drilled for hours, with no rest. That he was distraught over the loss of his 4 children. He argued that during the confession, he was brainwashed, and he had a nervous breakdown. The trial went on for 8 days, in downtown Detroit. Over 24 witnesses were called to testify. The jury deliberated for 9 hours, lasting over 2.5 days. Larry Delisle received the maximum sentence. 5 life terms, without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read aloud, Suzanne Delisle cried out in the courtroom. Larry Delisle was also seen crying. Judge Robert Colombo Jr. said, "I don't know if the defendant is guilty of the crimes of which he was convicted." He also implied that he didn't understand why the jury didn't convict him of a lesser charge. He then questioned his own ruling to deny the change of venue. He said, the jury may have been subconsciously influenced by what they already knew about the case through the media. Larry Delisle addressed the court with a brief statement proclaiming his innocence. "A father's job is to protect his children, and I failed," he told the court. "I panicked. I froze. That is my guilt, not murder. My children were the greatest gift my wife and I have ever shared," he went on to say. "I could never hurt them, never. I loved them with every fiber of my being, they were my life." Suzanne Delisle told the court that she believed her husband was an innocent man. As the survivor of an attempted murder, she was allowed to address the court under Michigan's victims' rights law. "The police weren't there. I was. I know Larry is innocent. We will be together again," she said. Several appeals were filed. His defense team claimed the jury was tainted by the publicity from the coerced confession, and the case should have been sent to a different location. The case went before the U.S. Supreme Court, who refused to even hear it. Larry Delisle is serving out his time in Coldwater, Michigan. He still claims to be innocent to this day. Leonardo Morita was born on May 29, 1949 in Indonesia. He worked as the city's electrician at the Hyperion sewage treatment plant in Los Angeles. He was married to 45-year-old Lucy, who was a real estate and mortgage broker business owner. She ran her business from the family's home, in San Marino, California. The couple had 3 children. 10-year-old Clint, 14-year-old Krishna, and 15-year-old Rama. The couple had lived in the United States for many years, but retained their Indonesian citizenship. They attended social functions at the Indonesian consulate, in Los Angeles. The couple were also members of the San Marino Community Church. Leonardo was having some personal problems in his life. In January of 1995, he took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on his wife, and $20,000 on each of his 3 children. He did not take out any insurance on himself. On May 26, 1995, neighbors noticed that Leonardo had spray-painted their house number with spray paint to obscure the address. On May 29, 1995, an emergency call was received, about a house fire. Firefighters rushed to the scene, where they found 46-year-old Leonardo Morita stumbling out of his driveway, with extensive burns to his body. He smelled strongly of gasoline. The house was fully engulfed, and the stairway was inaccessible due to the enormity of the fire. The blaze was so intense, that authorities had a hard time determining the sex of the victims. Later, in the autopsy, it was determined that Morita's wife, Lucy, the family's 25-year-old housekeeper, and all 3 children were the victims. Leonardo was taken to USC Medical Center where he was in critical condition. He had suffered intense second-degree burns from the fire and an explosion. He also had lung damage. He was not expected to live. He had minimal brain activity. Investigators found evidence right away that pointed to Leonardo. In his pockets they found matches. They discovered empty gas cans, which had his employer's logo on them. His station wagon also smelled strongly of gasoline. And there was strong evidence that he doused the stairway with so much gas that it dripped down into the basement, and into the pilot light of the water heater, causing a huge explosion, which ultimately led to his injuries. The matches and paper he planned to light the stairwell with were still in his pockets. He never got the chance due to the explosion, which started the fire. The house engulfed quickly due to all the gasoline he had doused in it. We have overwhelming and compelling evidence that it was arson. Fire Chief Frank Wills said. We're calling it a multiple homicide at this point. Authorities had hoped that Leonardo's condition may improve so they could interview him. But his condition worsened. He contracted pneumonia, and other complications. On July 6, 1995 he was eventually taken off of life support, and declared dead. Investigators said that none of the victims were in their beds. They were roused from their sleep when the explosion happened, but the stairwell engulfed in flames kept them from escaping. The investigators also believe Leonardo planned on making the crime look like a botched robbery. He had broken a kitchen window prior to the explosion. While breaking the window, he had cut himself severely on his right hand. Nancy Chen, neighbor to the Moritas, said the arson deaths were bad enough, but the fact the father could have done this was even more stunning. Authorities determined that Leonardo Morita murdered his family to collect the life insurance policies. If Morita would have survived, the district attorney's office had determined there was sufficient evidence to charge him with 5 counts of murder. Larry Delisle was found guilty of purposely driving into the Detroit River to kill his children. There's evidence that he may be innocent of these charges. Is it possible that an innocent man is behind bars? Leonardo Morita murdered his family for financial gain. It seems God had other plans. While pouring gas onto the stairway to trap his family, he poured so much that it dripped into the basement and into the pilot light of the hot water heater, causing a huge explosion that eventually took his own life. He got exactly what he deserved. It's tragic that his family didn't get out. That concludes this episode of Family Annihilators Who Predate Chris Watts. Keep your eye out for the next episode, coming soon. If you enjoy videos like this one, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.